Welcome back, it's Matt, and today we're going to go over the basics of Power BI. It's a very important tool used to gather insights on your data. I've used it in my last 3 jobs to provide reports on the performance of different markets, which stakeholders use to make key business decisions based on these findings. Let's get started.
So once we've downloaded and installed Power BI, we should see a screen like this one. And what we want to do is go ahead and click New Report. And we should see a screen similar to the one on display now. Now, just like we saw with Power Query in Excel, we can hit the Get Data tab and we have a list of options of sources in which we could retrieve our data from. Yeah, but right before we do that, let's go and make sure we've downloaded the file down below. Yeah, and let's open it up in Excel just so we can have a look at the data before we go ahead and load it in Power BI. So here we have our data. What we have in column A is an index column. We have in column B our country or dependency. C is population. D is population density per kilometer. E is population density per square mile. F is the area in kilometers. G is the area in square miles. And H is the date or year in which we source this information for that record. Now, if we go back to our Power BI desktop, and ensure we close down the Excel. So close window. We don't need to save that, as we won't be able to load it into Power BI if it's still open. So we'll just go to Get Data now, and it is a CSV file. So rather than Excel workbook, what we'll do this time is import a text/CSV, and we'll go to our downloads and we will click the list of country CSV. And just like when we loaded it in with Power Query, we get this display here. So we have the option of going into transform data, which will take us to our Power Query, or we can just load it straight into a model on display here. What we're going to do is we're going to load it into our Power Query editor, just so we can make some changes before we do. So this is our Power Query editor, and it's where we'll make our data transformational changes before we load it back into our model. So there's a few changes that I think we should make to this file before loading it. So firstly, let's change some of the column names. So just with this KM here, let's just put the KM in brackets. Let's do the same for square miles, and let's just put a space between square and the miles. Now, one thing that's just really bothering me is this source and date column. So the data just looks a bit messy because for some records we have the year and for others we have the date. Now, the ones with the year, we can't see what date it was, but the ones with the date, we can see what year it is. So if we can get them all into one consistent set of data, I'd say we should try and push to get them all to display the year. So the way we can do this in Power BI is if we highlight the column, head to our transform on the ribbon, and this small button here where it says extract, if we click the small arrow, what we can do is we can go to last characters. Now, for the year, the first characters and the last characters are both the same because there's only 4. So if we select 4, then we'll take our last 4 characters, which will be the year. And if we do the last 4 characters for the dates, then it will also be the year because the last 4 is the year. So if we put 4 in here, what we've got now is each record has the year. Now we have the source and date column in a consistent format. We can go ahead and change the format from text into whole number. Now let's add a conditional change called description. So what we want to do is we want to describe whether the population is large or small based on the population. So we'll say if it has more than 10 million people, then we'll say it's a large population. If not, let's say a regular one. Yeah. So we'll go to our conditional column in our add column section on the ribbon, and we'll call this description, and we'll say if the population is greater than or equal to 10 million, then we'll call that a large population, or else if it's not, then we'll say small population, or regular. It's not small, let's just say regular. So we'll hit OK. Yeah, so now what we've got is we've got regular populations, and we have a large one here, and that large one is Bangladesh. Yeah, the next large one we've got is in row 20, which is Taiwan, and the next one we have is in 24, which is South Korea. Yep, so that logic is working, and as we can see on the applied steps on the right hand side, we can see the steps that we've taken to make these changes. So we've renamed our column from area in kilometers, and we put the brackets around it. We've done the extraction of the last 4 characters for our source and date column. Actually, we should rename this date as well. So source and date, we've changed the type to a whole number. We've added a conditional column. Now let's just change this, because now we can just call it source year, as we know it's all in year. And now we have a renamed column as well. So source and date is now source year. So now, following the instructions on screen, what we need to do is download the file titled countries.csv, and it should look something like this file, where we've got a 2-digit country code in column A. Now what we want to do is make sure that the file looks like this, and then when we've finished, let's close the file, go back to our Power BI desktop, and what we need to do is load this into our Power Query editor. Yeah, so how we'll do this is go to our home tab on the ribbon, click on new source. It again is a CSV file, so we want to click on CSV. Yeah, once that is loaded, we'll click on countries.csv to pull it in. We'll then see a preview like the one that we have on screen. We'll click OK. And there we have it. It's now loaded into our Power Query editor, and we can start to do some transformations with this file as well. So now we have our 2 queries loaded into our Power Query editor. Let's set ourselves a small task. So in our countries query, we have our 2-digit country code. Yeah. How do we get this column into our main query? Yeah. So the way we'd need to do this is to somehow put these together. Now Power Query editor has a feature called merge queries. So we could merge these 2 queries together and hopefully get this column into this table. Yeah. Now the first thing before doing any kind of merge is to see what columns we have in common, because that's the only way it can work. So we would need to find a column that we have in this query that we also have in this query, and that's the only way it will join each record based on the like for like record in the queries. Yeah. So for this one, we have the country name. Yeah. And we also have the country name in this query. So let's try and merge the 2 queries based on the country column. So let's have a look. We go to merge queries. Now we're using the country column, so we select it, we just click on it, and then we need to click on our other query and select the name, which is the country name. Now we want to do a left join here, so we can select our joins. You've got left, right, full, inner, left anti, and right anti. Now a left outer join is going to join everything from our main table, which we want, all the columns, and it will just bring us the matching rows from the right, which is our countries. So that's exactly what we want to have. However, it's saying the selection only matches 192 of 252 rows. Now, let's have a look why that might be before we do the join. So when using the merge feature in Power Query, Power BI tries to find an exact match between the records of the chosen columns. So straight away, I can see in our country column here that we have brackets next to the countries such as Gibraltar, Bermuda, Aruba, and we don't have that in the name column in our countries query. So in order to try and find an exact match, we need to make sure that the data is in the same format. So what we need to do is remove any data or anything after the country name. So in this case, what we need to do is only keep the country name before the first bracket. So what we can do here is we can highlight our country or dependency column. We can go to transform data on the ribbon, and what we want to do is hit extract, and we just want the text before the delimiter and the left bracket, which is the opening bracket. Yeah. So hit OK. Now what we get is just the countries. Now, because there was a space in between the bracket of each, what we need to do is we now need to use the trim function to make sure that we remove any spaces that come after the country, as Power BI is very, very pedantic and it still won't recognize it. So we hit the format button here and we just click trim, and now we can see we've done an extraction here of the country before the delimiter, and then we've trimmed the text, and now we should be in a position to do our merge. So before we had 192 matches, and now when we do our merge we should have more than that. But first things first, let's do a data quality check. Now let's have a look at our countries query and let's scroll and see how many rows we have. So we have 222. So as we're doing a match with these countries to these countries, we should get a match of that same amount of rows that we've got. Yeah. So now let's apply our merge. So we need to select the country or dependency, and then from our countries query we need to select the name, and there we have it. All 222 from our country's name are matching from the first table. So let's click OK, and now what we get is a merge here, and we've got a countries column. What we need to do is expand this, and we can select the column that we want to see. So in our case, what we want to have is the 2-digit country code. Yeah. So if we click here on country, which is the 2-digit code, and we click OK, there we have it. Now we have the 2-digit country code from our countries table. And what we can do is we can rename this and call this country code. And to go even further with cleaning up our data, we can see here that we've got some nulls. Yeah? So if we click this arrow here, we can see that we have nulls. So if we just select that, we can see what nulls in fact we do have. So we can see here we have a list of nulls. So if we just go ahead and select all for that, what we can do is we can right click on this column and we could do a replace values and say when it's null we want to say no country code available, and there we have it. We have no more nulls and we have cleaned up our data. So now we've brought in our two columns, we've done our data transformations, including doing a merge between our main query and our countries query to bring in the 2-digit country code. Now let's load these into our models and let's start building some visualizations from this data. So here we hit at the home tab, and then we just want to close and apply, and then hit close and apply. So once that's finished loading, we should get a screen similar to the one on display right now. And this consists of our visualization section, a filter section, and a data section here, which is where the models get stored. And we can see our countries table, which consists of our countries columns, and then our main table, which is a list of countries, and our columns with our new transformations all loaded. So let's have a quick explore around Power BI. So if we go to our left hand side here, we can see that we're currently on the report view. So this blank canvas here is what we're going to call the report editor. And we've already mentioned that we have a section here where we'll put our filters. We have our visualization section and our data section where the models are kept. Right. Now, just below the report view, we have a table view, which is what we saw in Power Query. So if you click on our countries table, we can see the countries table here. And if we click on our list of countries table, then we see that table in the same way we saw it in Power Query. And at the bottom, we have our model view, and this shows the relationships between our tables. So if we go back to our report view, so we can see at the bottom, it says page 1. So similar to Excel, these sort of work like Excel worksheets. So you can click and you can open up a new page, and in the same way, we have the same blank canvas, the same views and the same filters, visualization and data section on the right hand side. Now we can go ahead and delete this. We could also duplicate our pages and rename them and hide them, so we don't have to delete them if we built visualizations and we want to keep it but not display it as users. We can actually hide it, but in this case we're going to go ahead and delete. And at the top we have our data section. So this is where we can source our data. As we saw before, there are a load of ways in which we could pull data from Power BI. If we click on more, we can see all of the different ways in which we can fetch data and pull it into our report. Excel workbook, OneLake Data Hub, SQL Server. Here we can just create a new table by manually typing in or pasting in data. We have a Dataverse, and recent sources, we can pull our recent files into Power BI. In the middle, we have our queries section where we have our transform data button and our refresh button. So the transform data button has our data source settings and our transform data button. So the data source settings is where we manage settings for our data sources, and the transform data button is what will take us back to our Power Query editor, which is where we were before we loaded data onto this view. And our refresh button here is what will refresh to bring us our latest data and refresh the visuals in this report. So let's go and start building our first visuals. So before anything, let's create a title for our report. So we'll go to our insert section and click on text box. And what we'll do is we will just drag from the corner right, and let's just stretch this across, make it nice and big, and drag that across. And we'll call this, let's do it in caps, let's call it test report. And what we'll do is highlight this, and just like in Excel, we can just center this. Let's change the font size. So let's go for 54, so make it nice and big. We can change the font style. So let's go for this one. And we can go to our font colors, and let's just make it like a bright reddish color. Yeah. So now we've got our title to our report. We can go and start pulling in some data. So if we head back across to our visualizations, you can see here it says build visual, which is where we can add data to our visual. And here we can format the report page. So we'll start first with adding data to our visual. So first we'll pick a visual, and I always like to start with the easiest one and the easiest way to display the data, in my opinion, which is a table. So let's click on this table button here, and what Power BI has done is pulled in a table visual onto our canvas. Now to start bringing data into our visuals, all we need to do is click inside the visual and then just select the columns that we want to bring in. So we could either do it by clicking the checkbox, or we can drag and drop it into this section where it says columns. So I'm going to do 2 of each just for demonstration purposes. So let's first bring in our country or dependency, So we'll just click and it will load it in there. Let's bring in the population. Yeah. Let's also bring in the country code, and we'll do this one by dragging it and dropping it. And we'll also bring in the description that we created. So here you can see, so let's just make this a bit smaller because we don't need it to be that big. And let's drag it to the center. So Power BI tells you when you're in the center by giving you that red line there. So if we now just stretch this a bit just to make it a bit neater. Now here we have our 4 columns that we've brought into our table. Yeah. And on the right hand side here, under columns, you can see the name of it. So if you hover over it, it tells you the table and the column name. Now we can rename these by double clicking inside and changing the name of it. So if I double click in here, I can just call this country instead of country or dependency. Of course, this is a sum of population. We can just call this population and hit enter. And now we have our first visual with our 4 columns inside. So now that we have our first visual, let's see what we can do to our table to make it stand out a bit more. So if we click inside and go to our format your visual button under our visualizations, here under visual, we have a number of options we can choose to help style our visual. So if we click on style presets, here, this is where we can use one of our Power BI templates. So we can click on alternating rows, flashy rows. For now, I'm just going to keep it at default. We can choose to have horizontal grid lines. So at the moment we have them. If we turn them off, there won't be any grid lines horizontally, but if we have them on, let's change the color just to show what they look like. Yeah, so you can see the horizontal grid lines there, and we could also increase the width by doing the up arrow or down to put it down, or we can actually just enter a number here ourselves. So I'll change that back to gray. Same with vertical grid lines, so we can have these in. Let's change that to pink. Yeah. We can have a border, so we can choose whether we want to have a border on just the values, just our column header, total section, or on everything. So if we have it on everything, just have another color, say orange, and let's do top, bottom, left, and right, just to show what they do. If we go to our value section, we can choose the text color and the alternate text color. As you can see, they're alternating, so we can say we want to have this a pink color, and we can say the alternate text color we want to have, let's choose yellow, and we can choose the background color as well. So we can say for the alternate text we can have black, so it'll be yellow on black, and then for the pink one we could have it on, say, what's a good color? Let's go for this color. Guess that works. Looks a bit gloomy. And same here with column headers. Again, we can change the font, the text, the background color, whether we want it on the left, the center, or on the right. We can choose a specific column if we just wanted a specific column to have a certain color or a certain background. We can choose that column and we could apply it. So let's say we wanted the population to the values. We wanted the text to be, let's say, what's a good color? Yellow. Then all the population there is yellow. Yeah. And then we have our cell elements where we can apply settings to a specific column based on a rule, which is just like our conditional formatting in Excel. So just to show an example of our cell elements section, we can apply our settings to our series. So for this one, we'll choose country, and we'll apply it to our background color. So if we toggle this to on, it will open up a box here. So now we can create a rule that applies to our values, and we'll base it on the field country or dependency in our list of countries and dependencies. And we'll say if the value is, let's go for Angola, only because I can see it right here. If the value is Angola, then we want the background to be light blue. So let's click OK. So now we can see it's changed that Angola value background to a light blue. So it works very similar to our conditional formatting in Excel. So now we've finished making a mess here of our visuals. Let's just go back and let's hit style presets and let's click on minimal just to change it back to something we can recognize. Oh, and also let's turn off our Angola light blue. So if we go to cell elements and just untoggle background color, now we're back to simple life, a simple table.
Thanks for watching. Please comment with any questions that you have, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more data content.